and come here and join us to learn and grow. We love you guys. Thank you so much. And now, Trace, come on down.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First off, good morning, everybody. I'm sure you've got questions about the taco piñata that I've got right here. You will have to just hold on and you'll learn about it later. Wow. Let me get my computer set up real quick. All right. So if you've been with us, you're probably aware that we've been working our way through the book of Colossians. Colossians is a letter that was written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Colossae. Now, during this time, Paul was imprisoned in Rome. Chapter 4, which is what I'm covering, what I'm finishing our series out with, it's the last chapter in the book, and it contains little more than Paul's closing remarks. To be completely honest, the great theological meat of this epistle is found in the earlier chapters. With that being the case, it would be easy for most to just bypass this final portion entirely without giving any serious thought to it. And I would encourage you to not do that. Do not do that. While chapter 4 contains very little explicit teaching, it does give us a picture of what the early church would have found important, what they made as a priority. And it gives us a small glimpse into the mind of an apostle. And for the church today, it gives us some instruction as to how we should structure our lives. So, this morning, I want to invite you to join me in seeing what we can learn at the end of a letter. Let's begin. Be devoted to prayer, keeping alert in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray for us, too, that God may open a door for the message so that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Pray that I make it known as I should. Be devoted to prayer. I have received many blessings in my life, and one of the blessings that I'm most thankful for is that unlike a lot of individuals, I'm still very close friends with a lot of my old high school and elementary school friends. Many of us still talk, we still get together quite regularly. When I get to go back to my hometown, I reach out to them. They usually throw a big party for me when I get there, and I sat on the cord. Wow, that's startling. Okay, I'm going to watch this cord a little bit more closely. And they'll come up and visit me. I'll get to hang out with them. You get the picture. One of those friends is named Caleb. Now, Caleb and I were very close back then in school, and we are still very close today. Caleb was actually my friend since elementary school. You see, before I was an athlete, before I became popular in high school, back when I was being picked on, Caleb was one of my friends, back when I was a tall, lanky, nerdy kid. And then throughout high school, when I was an athlete, when I did become popular, he was my friend then. But Caleb wasn't into sports. He wasn't into anything that required a lot of physical energy, really. He was into strategic video games. He liked reading, movies, and theater. He did ballet every once in a while, and he was really into trading card games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! He even built me a deck one time that I still have, though I don't play it, I just have it. Caleb's body reflected these interests of his. At some point after my one semester at college, Caleb decided that he wanted a change. He didn't want to be out of shape anymore, and so he began working out. He was at the gym every day, and it didn't stop there. He began calculating his macro and micronutrients. He started meal prepping each day. He would study up on every little detail that pertained to nutrition and fitness. This man was hyper-focused on hitting his goal. And when he hit it, he set a new one, and then a new one, and then a new one. Today, he is an avid competitor in bodybuilding championships. He runs his own personal training business named Temple of Iron. And I talked to him on the phone. I gave him a call before I put him in my lesson. I wanted to make sure he was fine with me talking about him. And he let me know that his business is going great, and he currently has plans to build his own gym. Complete and utter devotion completely changed his life. I think sometimes we forget what it really means to be devoted to something or to someone. I mean, one look at current divorce statistics will prove my point there. See, you can really want something just really bad. You can want something so very bad and not be devoted to it. I'm sure that there are plenty of people here who desperately want a devoted prayer life. But to be truly devoted to prayer, like Caleb was to getting in shape, it takes work, a lot of work. Every day, throughout the day, you need to study it. You need to apply it. You need to contemplate it, think about it. You need to discipline yourself to stick with it. It's not easy, and trust me, I'm not innocent here either. The truth is that there's so much noise all around us. Everything is so loud. You need to do this, I got to do that. I don't have the time, I don't have the energy. There's always something extremely loud, something distracting. With all of that, it becomes so easy for us to ignore that quiet whisper that comes from the Spirit. That soft yet resolute voice that calls you to commune with the King. And we all know that we ought to listen to it. We know that we need to speak with the King. But for some reason, we staple prayer at the back of our to-do list. There is a book that I firmly believe every man should read at least once in their life. It's called Wild at Heart. It's written by a man named John Eldredge. And the primary focus of this book is to help men understand the image of God that we reflect. In it, he likens all of human life to this epic war that is being waged, a war in which, whether you like it or not, you are a combatant. And he parallels prayer to radio communication with the commander-in-chief, where you can report on your current conditions, the state of your unit. You can request resources or an updated battle plan. You can receive up-to-date information and direction. You get the idea. Now, this book was primarily written towards men. However, this excerpt that I'm about to read is applicable for both men and women. So ladies, pay attention. See, in the book, he makes a point that we all really need to internalize. He says most people have a hard time sustaining any sort of devotional life because it has no connection to recovering and protecting their strength. It feels about as important as flossing. But if you saw your life as a great battle and you knew that you needed time with God for your very survival, you would do it. Maybe not perfectly, nobody ever does, and that's not the point anyway. But you would have a reason to seek him. We give a half-hearted attempt at the spiritual disciplines when the only reason we have is that we ought to. But we'll find a way to make it work when we are convinced that we're history if we don't. To the early church, prayer wasn't just some religious expectation that they met. It was vital. They viewed it as not just necessary, but essential to their own survival. It wasn't their last resort, it was their very beginning plea. At its core, prayer is communication with God, where we can lay down our worries, our needs, and our wants, and our thanks at the foot of the throne. But we have become so desensitized to the reality of that statement that it hardly paints the picture that it should. So let me rephrase it this way. At any point, at any time, you may enter the heavenly courts before the Most High Creator who breathed stars into existence. The very same God who cut down the Egyptian gods, toppled the walls of Jericho, and consumed Sodom and Gomorrah with fire is seated on his throne, ready to hear your plea and guide your feet. That's the reality of prayer. That's the picture that we have drawn for us. But our human eyes can only see so much. And what should be one of our greatest assets, something that we want to do continually and eagerly, has become a ritual utterance before we eat. I want to draw some attention to Paul's prayer request as well. This man is imprisoned in Rome. This is not a nice prison. This is rough, stone, chain, beating, and thorns. And instead of asking that they pray for his release, which is probably what I would have done, instead of asking that his situation become easier, he asks that they pray for a door to be opened, not for him, but for the message of Christ. He asks that they would pray for him to proclaim the gospel as he should. Chained up in Rome, Paul's primary concern is that he be a faithful witness and representative of Christ. That his chains would not impede the spread of the gospel. That reflects a warlike mindset. Not for me, but for the cause. For the early Christians, one should be devoted to prayer, and those prayers should be devoted to Christ. If we want to return to the mindset of the early church, then we should do the same. Discipline yourself to make prayer a priority in life. And let the content of that prayer supersede yourself and your situation. It's good. It is good to pray for things that you need and for things that you want, things that others need or that others want. It's good to pray to be out or removed from a really rough situation, but we also need to remember that there is, in fact, a calling above us, which leads to my next point. Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunities. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer everyone. I always get so thirsty talking. I do something with my students called the taco box. This is the taco box. It's a really simple premise. Any questions that any of them have about Christianity or other religions, about science or moral quandaries that they run onto, personal advice that they want to ask, or moral struggles that they're facing and they don't feel okay with everyone knowing, they write those anonymously on a card. Get a little note card, they write it on the card, and you'll see there's a little slot right there. I'm about to do it again with them next month, so I'm collecting the questions. You can hear some of my cards in there. They drop that card right through here. I give them the option that if they want to talk one-on-one with me, they can write their name and write personal on it, but they don't have to do that. It can be completely anonymous. And if it's anonymous, what I will do is conduct a whole lesson on that topic. I will prepare that lesson, and then when it's the week for that message, we will all talk about it. It's a really dumb joke, but I really like it. So I only brought this on stage to reveal the talk about it. One of the questions I got early on when I first made this box, bought the piñata, cut it out, one of the first questions I got was, why don't people believe in God? Good question. In that lesson, I explained that different people have different reasons for not believing, and for them, they're very valid reasons. You could take all of those reasons and you can separate them into two separate categories. There are rational reasons, and there are emotional reasons. Rational reasons have a lot to do with hard evidence, like scientific or historical facts. Honestly, these are things that I love answering because they're easy. It's not really hard for me. Usually my brain, the way that I process things, I want to see hard facts, then I'll like to go with it. And then you have emotional reasons, which are much more difficult. These are hard. These have a lot more to do with one's own emotions as to whether or not they think God and his followers are good. And that's my whole point in bringing this up. You see, every day, each person that claims the title of Christian, that bears the name of Christ, stands as an example to the entire world as to what Jesus is like. Every statement we make and every action we take will stand as a reflection of Christ in the eyes of a non-believer. Now, I don't want to imply that you have to live a perfect life, because you can't. You can't. And neither do I want you to think that by your actions someone will be saved or damned, because that's simply not true. What I want you to understand is that the conduct and speech of current believers paints a picture of Christ that is either true and majestic or distorted and despicable. Our actions need to be conducted with wisdom, and our words need to be gracious, yet firmly set in truth, so that we may paint an accurate picture of Christ for the non-Christian. And in order to do that, we need to be capable of responding to both the rational and the emotional reasons for non-belief. There's this lie. That chord's really got it out for me today, doesn't it? There's this lie that's been floating around for a long time. Non-believers and believers will espouse it without ever giving it any thought. And what it is faith means to believe something without evidence. That is not biblical faith. It has never been biblical faith. If you don't have any reasons for calling yourself a Christian, then you need to find some. You need to find some evidence for what you believe, because otherwise, how do you know what you're believing is true? Faith means to trust in something that you have reasonable evidence to believe. I have never been to Pakistan. I've heard trustworthy people that say that they've been to Pakistan, that I believe them, say that there is in fact a Pakistan. I have reasonable evidence to believe Pakistan is real. Jesus never said to believe something without evidence. He always provided evidence to back up his claims. Always. That was the whole point of every single miracle that he performed, was an evidence as to who he was, so that through his actions, people would see that he was telling the truth. The apostles, when they spread the gospel, they constantly explained why they believed Jesus is the Christ. And they did it for what doesn't make sense in our time, but made a lot of sense in their time, by quoting Old Testament prophecy that Yeshua had fulfilled. They said, remember this passage that was spoken 400 years, 500 years, 1,000 years before? Look at how Jesus fulfilled this. Look at how his actions actually brought this to fruition. This was a big deal for the early church, to provide insight and reason for following the way, the truth, and the life. But far too often today, The Christian's response to a difficult, rational, or emotional question is, you need to have more faith. There's some questions that we may never get an answer to in this life. But there are a lot of questions that we do have answers for, and we just haven't prepared to answer them. I'm going to tell you one that really yanks my chain. Anytime I hear Christians say that they do not believe in the Big Bang Theory. You kidding me? Did you know that the Big Bang Theory is one of the strongest evidences for a creator, a God of some sort? From the Big Bang, you can explain a God. You don't get necessarily to the Christian God all the time, not yet. There's other historical facts, there's other things that we can work through to bring it to the Christian God. But it does bring up the kind of need for a creator, for a God of some sort. Originally, non-believers, atheists, they held on to what was called the steady state theory. The steady state theory just essentially it suggested that the universe has always been in existence and it hasn't really changed much. That was the predominant belief. But in 1931, the Big Bang Theory was officially proposed in a paper by George Lemar. I may have screwed his name up. It looks French, but George Lemar, a Belgian cosmologist and, coincidentally, a Catholic priest. Essentially, via the Hubble telescope, we were able to observe that galaxies were moving, and they were moving further and further away from each other. You do the math, you rewind the clock, what you find is that all of time, space, and matter converge on a single microscopic point of infinite density. And it continues to get smaller and smaller and smaller. They'll say, well, there's still something, but it's essentially nothing. It's microscopic, beyond microscopic, going smaller and smaller and smaller, infinitely dense. Here's the kicker. We have no idea why this microscopic point of infinite density just went off, or how it was even possible for it to go off in the first place. No idea. Secular or Christian scholars cannot seem to figure out how or why, how it's even possible for it to have happened. It happened seemingly at random in a massive flash of light, which brought all of time, space, and matter into existence within the blink of an eye. To quote Alexander Vilenkin, who is the professor of physics and director of the Institute of Cosmology at Tufts University, with the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, the Bible is not now and was never intended to be taken as a scientific textbook. Believe it or not, the ancients weren't super concerned with science. They were more concerned with metaphor and explanation and what they could observe. So we shouldn't treat the Bible like a scientific textbook. We should treat the Bible exactly how it was intended to be treated, and that is as a collection of ancient literature that faithfully details the relationship between God and man. With that being said, though, can you look me in the eye and honestly say that the Big Bang Theory doesn't sound exactly like the explanation given in Genesis 1:1? It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is just a tiny little bit of rational evidence that seems to point in the direction of a creator. I'm not even bringing up the laws of thermodynamics or the fine-tuning argument or all the fulfilled prophecy in both the Old and the New Testament. You want to see some crazy stuff? Look at Jesus' prophecy about the temple in Jerusalem. Look at the prophecy that's given, I don't remember which book, it's in the Old Testament, but given about the destruction of Tyre, destruction of the Phoenician city of Tyre. To the T explanations are insane. The fine-tuning argument, golly. Did you know, I'll just say this real quick because I can't go away, I can't step out without doing it. Did you know if our gravitational constant, the gravitational constant of the universe was off by a millimeter in either direction, we would not exist. There would not be anything here. Stars would not exist. That's the equivalent to putting a tape measure at one end of the universe, you standing on the other end of the observable universe, taking a shot with a handgun and hitting one exact point. If you miss that point by an inch in either direction, we don't exist. That's the mathematical probability of that actually occurring. It's insane. All I'm saying is that the primary theory to explain the physical universe as we observe it seems to fall right in line with the very first verse of Scripture. Yet there are believers that want to kick back against this because someone that is a non-believer said, I believe in the Big Bang Theory, and you say, no, that's not how it happened. There are mountains of scientific evidence and historical evidence that seem to fall right in line with Scripture. So why is it that the secular world believes that Christianity and science, or Christianity and history, are not compatible? There are a number of reasons to be sure, but one of them is that we haven't conducted ourselves with wisdom and prepared to make the most of every opportunity. Study these things. Look into them, not from fringe people with shady credentials, which is sadly common for Christians to do, where you listen to and then repeat some strange pseudoscience that was taught from someone who bears no weight in the scientific community. No, instead learn from experienced individuals with years of experience in their field, like Dr. John Lennox, the mathematician, or Dr. Stephen Meyer, the biologist. If you want recommendations, feel free to come to me after service. I have so many I can recommend on every field, on theological apologetics, on the validity of the New Testament, on science, on history. There's all sorts, and different fields of science, from physics to biology to geology. There's some really cool stuff. So if you want more information on people to look into, feel free to come after me after service. Jesus said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. If we really believe that, then we don't need to be afraid of the truth. And this passage stretches way further than just simple apologetics. A few years back, I was talking with a man that did some sort of maintenance work. I don't remember who he was or even exactly what he did. It was a very brief conversation that I had with him in passing. But I'll never forget what he said. He mentioned that he hated working on churches because they always expected to receive a discount or even to get the work done for free. Listen, that's not what Paul meant by make the most of every opportunity. If you have a cross hanging on your front door, then maybe, just maybe, the pizza guy shouldn't leave your property without a tip, especially when the person with a coexist sticker on their car gave them a pretty substantial one. Maybe when your kid's teacher is telling you about how your child misbehaved, you could let them know that you are thankful for the heads up and that you'll make sure to correct it at home, instead of giving them a huge rant about how mistaken they are and how your child is God's great gift on this green earth. When I was fresh out of high school, I worked at a store called GameStop. GameStop is a retail video game store. It was my college job for my one semester in college. And there was a game coming out called Doom. Doom is a remake of an older game by the same name. I think it's really cool. The whole premise of Doom is that a bunch of scientists on the planet Mars, they are experimenting with teleportation, and they accidentally open a portal to hell, which allows all sorts of demons to flood into the Mars base. And the character that you play as is a simple Marine who gets a lot of guns, and he purges the demonic presence from Mars with those guns. It's a really dumb premise. It's not theologically sound at all. But it is a lot of fun. A guy came in one day, he was talking about how excited he was for the Doom game, and since I was excited for it too, it's one of my favorite games, we were talking about it when he said, I bet there are all sorts of conservative Christians that are mad about this Doom game coming out, about Doom coming out. I was a little taken aback. I'm a Christian and a conservative. I don't want to toot my own horn, but there are plenty of situations that I've handled very poorly. But I think I did pretty well on this one. I asked him why he felt that way, and he said, all the demons and the metal music and the blood. And I told him, well, I'm a Christian and I'm a conservative, and I'm really excited about the game. I mean, you're getting a bunch of guns and then killing demons with them. If you think about it, it's the most Christian conservative game on the market. all he said was, I didn't think about that. He stopped talking to me, he wandered around the store, kind of looking at stuff, and then he left. I could have easily been offended. I could have easily gone off on a rant about how wrong he was. I could have easily tried to point out, no, this is a fine game, and there's not any of them that are mad about it, or who cares? I could have let loose on all sorts of stuff, or I could have stayed quiet. I could have remained quiet and just nodded my head without bringing up my faith at all. But I didn't. I talked to him graciously, and at the end of the day, I either gave him something to think about when it comes to his perception of Christians, or I ruined the Doom game for him. It's one of those two. Let our speech be gracious and seasoned with salt, so that we may know how to answer anyone. The truth is that all of this stuff that I'm saying is very hypothetical. It is. But that's kind of the point that I'm trying to get across with it. We need to contemplate the hypothetical here. We need to entertain the hypothetical situations. Seriously consider how you would react given any scenario, and plan to have the best answer that you can have. Truly consider with every interaction if our conduct is painting an accurate picture of Christ or not. You may never have someone tell you that there is no fulfilled prophecy in the Bible. But if you do, you want to make the most of that opportunity and answer them with gracious words that are well seasoned. Tychus, a dear brother, faithful minister, and fellow slave in the Lord, will tell you all the news about me. I sent him to you for this very purpose, that you may know how we are doing and that he may encourage your hearts. I sent him with Onesimus, the faithful and dear brother who is one of you. They will tell you about everything here. Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, sends you greetings, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. And Jesus, who is called Justus, also sends greetings. In terms of Jewish converts, these are the only fellow workers for the kingdom of God, and they have been a comfort to me. Epaphras, who is one of you and a slave of Christ, greets you. He is always struggling in prayer on your behalf, so that you may stand mature and fully assured in all the will of God. For I can testify that he has worked hard for you and for those in Laodicea and Hierapolis. Our dear friend Luke, the physician, and Demas greet you. Give my greetings to the brothers and sisters who are in Laodicea and Nympha, and the church that meets in her house. And after you have read this letter, have it read to the church of Laodicea in turn. Read the letter from Laodicea as well. Wow. I'm trying not to move. I don't want to set it off more. This is really typical of Paul. It's standard, really, in pretty much all of the Pauline epistles. Paul sends greetings of several other individuals or churches in his closing remarks. Now, I don't know if Paul really intended to do what he did. I don't know if Paul really intended to do what he did with this, but if he did, it was really quite brilliant. See, the early church had this problem with a group called the Gnostics. The Gnostics were essentially the first quote-unquote Christian cult. It was actually very similar to this whole New Age spiritualism that we have going on today. They taught that they had received secret knowledge. Secret knowledge is a big kind of keyword for them. And that the whole physical world was all bad, that the physical world was bad, so what we needed to do was to transcend the physical to the spiritual, and that Jesus was just this human who had transcended along with a bunch of other stuff like that, a bunch of things that we would consider heretical. And the Gnostics, they would send out people who essentially said that, yeah, we teach the Christian faith, except we have secret knowledge to help you along this spiritual journey. You can imagine the problem this presented for the apostles and the early church. How did you know if this guy who claims that he follows Jesus is actually affiliated with the apostles or not? In listing all these names and the churches in his greetings, Paul starts to create a network of individuals that are in fact affiliated with the apostles and are teaching accurate doctrine. If Paul had mentioned you positively in one of his letters, then you could be trusted by the broad church. With all the information flying around today, I cannot stress how applicable this is. Each of us, all of us, needs a network of reliable fellow believers in our lives. People that you can come to for spiritual advice, godly men and women that can help you navigate this treacherous world. Friends in the faith that you can bounce questions back and forth with. People you can feed into. People who can feed into you. If you really want to grow as a Christian, then you need to have a network of fellow believers that you meet with on days other than Sunday morning. Here at Christ's Church, we're about to have a life group class to teach discipleship, and all of our church staff will be leading it on different days of the week. Deborah and I are doing ours on Thursday nights. Sign up. Show up. This is an easy way to start building a network of fellow believers. It's an easy way. If you don't have one, join a group. Meet some people in it. Talk to them. Make connections. Invite other people. I'm not telling you that you have to join a Bible study. It's not the only way to do this. What I am telling you is that you need to find fellow believers that you can just hang out with, talk to. And here at Christ Church, we really do try to provide several opportunities for you to do that. So take advantage of it. Utilize it. Fellowship and connection with each other was vital for the early church. It should be for our modern church as well. And tell Archippus, see to it that you complete the ministry you received in the Lord. I, Paul, write this greeting by my own hand. Remember my chains. Grace be with you. As we close out today and move into communion, I want to leave you with one last thing. All of this is difficult. All of this is difficult. If you are a new believer in with us today, I understand that it's a lot. I'm sure all you can think about is, I didn't know I was signing up for this. Constant prayer every day. Need to set an example of Christ, but that guy was perfect. Studying scripture, science, and history. And then you add to all of that you want me to make friends with these weirdos. It can be a lot. And it isn't always easy. And it might take a lot of time. And you're never going to do it perfectly. I can personally attest to that. But it is worth it. There's nothing more exciting or more beautiful than being a member of Christ's body. We are a people who are broken and scarred and far from perfect, but we are united in the thing that matters most. United in the fact that Jesus' body was broken and scarred for our sake, so that we may take part in fellowship with him and with each other. So see to it that you complete the ministry you received in the Lord. That is what we can learn from the end of a letter. Let's move into communion.